inside is what we call a circuit board. And it has lots of different little lines and things going on. Fortunately, you don't have to know too much about what they actually are, because these toys all make noise, hopefully. And if your toy doesn't make noise, then that'll be the first problem to look into. And what we're looking for are ways to change those sounds and find maybe ways that these toys weren't making the sounds before. Daniel is coming around with alligator clips to help you sort of touch together points of these circuits that maybe weren't ever made to be touched together before. And in touching together those different points on your instruments, you may find that they make different and strange noises. And again, there are other people walking around, and you can just sort of grab them or look at them longingly and maybe ask them a question about what's going on in there. But really, initially, I would just want you to explore the inside of these instruments.
Do you want the rock show, or do you want the workshop details of what I'm doing?
Rock and roll!
This is the SK1. The SK1 is about the finest thing to bend. It's perfect. There's so much to do with it. Really, everybody here should be playing with the SK1.
Yes.
To start out with, it's magnificent.
Or speaks.
This is some random generation. Start out with the tone. And it will just go. It will just go until it crashes on itself. And it's all mathematics, really. It's just playing itself until it just reaches its point of destruction, basically. And then you have to restart it, you play again. I'll be doing an installation this week with something like 20 Furbies, all totally stripped down to their bare naked circuitry. You know, yapping gibberish non-stop. It's gonna be insane.
Hot.
You're gonna hate it. You're just gonna leave right away. It's disgusting.
I mean, because it's anything that has a circuit. We can bend in audio primarily for audio. I have a video device that I can, but it's
Interesting. Yeah.
I like all the buttons. It's good.
That's nice.
circuit boards is literally what they do.
Circuit bends with a raw.
I would say, yeah, you could say that. Sure. You're asking something to do something that it's not supposed to do. You're sending water.
I was looking on the internet, researching electronics and things like that, and I came across Rika's site, and he first, talked about circuit bending, coined the phrase, talked about the process. This looks like something that would be a lot of fun. So I went out and bought a lot of toys and things like that, and then that's where it all started.
I found this at a flea market or a thrift store. There are a surprising number of, I guess, older pieces of junk laying around, really. There's definitely a certain craft to being able to get up on stage without, with hardware you built, I think. And you'll see a lot of that in the more toy performance. The speak and spells. These people have spent a lot of time disassembling them, repurposing the interface, and sort of reworking electronics inside to have something kind of unique.
I played with this for like hours on end. Yes. Man, this is happening. What do you think the add-on box? I just thought you'd want a speaker on it, So I just threw this whole extra unit on.
And is it
Got some sawdust on it.
behaving a bit better?
Yeah, totally.
It was pretty out there before. Plus it got completely thrashed around and taken it on a couple tours.
Yeah, it was really it was really trashed. I basically had to resolder everything.
Some kid in Portland got a hold of it.
Yeah, he did all this.
Yeah.
All of those are falling off.
Yeah. I mean, he did them in about 10 minutes flat, so
Right.
I can't complain. But I started sniffing around and trying to figure out it's got this strange, myth about it that you have to know what you're doing to get into it, and that is intimidating. It scared me away for a long time. I didn't want to buy anything because I didn't know what anything did. And then when I started realizing that most of it is highly uncontrollable and illogical, it appealed to me even more because I don't have that kind of a brain that would process that kind of information anyway. I just want to turn a fucking knob and have it make a hideous racket.
For me, punk rock was always about getting it out there. Didn't matter if you could play or not. If you wanted to play, you should get it out there. And so circuit bending has that. and kids should stop fucking doing mods and start actually probing circuits. Maybe even leave the speak and spells alone. Leave the SK1s alone. Find something of your own. I like this thing here, right here. I do actually keep this by my desk. This is not a prop. And I usually don't paint my stuff. This was the earliest bend that I kept and is still living. This was a line that they did at Radio Shack, or was sold by Radio Shack. It was probably done by several people, called the Musical Animal Playground. Added a couple of photo cells to it, so you can. It's like an instant cartoon music. And I like it because you can be very rough with it and it doesn't take a lot of space. There you go. That's why you circuit bend, because it's fun. I ended up buying about 20 of these things and stuck them in storage, thinking I was going to make a bunch of them, and I didn't.
Well, I've been building circuit bent instruments for a couple years. I've been running a small business called Casper Electronics, and selling these instruments to musicians, performers, artists. And I'm just psyched to be here and show people what I'm doing, see what other people are doing. The work is fantastic. There's a lot of really great ideas, a lot of enthusiasm. You know, people are really passionate about what they do, and it's just fantastic that there's an opportunity for people to show this stuff, you know, show how exciting and big this is. So originally, it was a really simple echo. You couldn't affect it in any way. You couldn't change the amount of echo, the level of it, or anything. And it certainly didn't make any weird bleeping, screeching sounds. And this was all created just by going in and rewiring the circuitry, you know, wiring different pins of the circuit, the echo circuit, and adding different controls to it. And now it does all kinds of screeching and weird sounds. Texas Instruments Speak and Spell. This is one of the most common circuit bending instruments for a bunch of reasons. It's really well made. It's really easy to glitch. There's tons and tons of different bends you can do to it. It's really stable. They don't break very often. And they have ultra complex speech synthesis circuitry in them. So when you modify them, they can do some unusual sounds. You can make it do a looping sound. And it'll make this sort of rhythmic looping. And then you can change the sound slightly. And you can get it to start making these sort of more melodic rhythms and sort of random little melodies. Well, here it is normally. Turn it on. You press the go and it asks you to spell things. But if you turn this on and you press go, it's very different. It just kind of keeps going. I've been doing a lot of work for Mike Patton. He has been touring around with a lot of this stuff. And you know, I know that that he and musicians like him really appreciate having something that's kind of new, the type of sound that, you know, or any type of sound that people just haven't heard a lot of. You know, it's just introduces them to something completely different and surprises people and excites people. And it really adds a whole other element to their whole performance.
My name is Blaze, and I've been doing this, well, I've been an artist. My father was a working artist, so I've been an artist my whole life, like a working artist basically. And I discovered this 4 or 5 years ago and totally fell in love, you know, and I started bending toys. This is an optical synthesizer. It's almost completely played just with your hands, with light. It picks up light, and it works similar to turning a knob, turning a potentiometer. So it's a variable resistance that's based on light. It's light sensitive.
Festival is a circuit bending festival. It's the first circuit bending festival, and we're having it a whole bunch of artists for the week here. We have gallery installation downstairs, and we're having performances and open workshops for the public to be able to come in and try their hand out at this art.
We actually decided to do the festival because we do a lot of experimental music here that people, the general public comes in and they don't necessarily understand what's going on, or they're a little intimidated by seeing lots of people with laptops and sort of mysterious black boxes, and so we thought we'd have a festival of an experimental type of music that's much more visual. People can sort of go and they can try it themselves. They can take some of the mystery and some of the fear out of very experimental music. And, you know, the music is sort of becoming much more prevalent in terms of you see it sort of everywhere you go. And if the audience can sort of come and at least a little bit understand what's going on, they can get more engaged with the music and be a bit more excited by it.
Do you think anyone can do this?
Definitely anyone. I mean, after this weekend, I would definitely say anyone could. We had, you know, over 100 people in this room on Saturday, and, you know, the majority of them had never even heard of circuit bending before in their lives. And you sit people down, and even before you tell them what to do, they're sort of cracking the toys open. It's a very liberating feeling to sort of rip apart these toys that you're sort of so used to them doing one thing all the time, and people just immediately start poking around. I mean, it's all about sort of play and exploration, and it's something that comes very naturally to people. And people are always afraid of, you know, breaking sort of these delicate, you know, guitars or, you know, fancy electronic, you know, instruments. And so it's nice to have a bunch of really cheap toys. You bring them all in, and nobody's worried about breaking anything because they're so cheap. And you just start touching around, and like Daniel says, immediately, you know, you'll hear this different noise, and people just get so excited by it, and it makes them want to just keep poking around.
I was a penniless hippie kid, frankly, back in the late 60s. And I was already a musician, I was a drummer, I was also playing keyboards and a little bit of bass guitar. But I had heard synthesizers and I really wanted one. But yeah, where am I going to come up with hundreds of dollars for a synthesizer? This little amplifier shorted out, it was a 9-volt toy amplifier, shorted out in my desk drawer, made sound similar to the Columbia Princeton machines but on a very tiny scale. And I thought, if that can happen by accident, what can happen by purpose? And from that point on, I purposely short-circuited just about every battery-powered audio device I could get a hold of. And, you know, over time, I heard what really sounded like a new world of music developing, because there were similarities, you know, across the board from circuit to circuit, as though I had entered some kind of a space where this new music existed, kind of the way human music exists. As you go around the world, you find that there are these certain aspects to music that are similar, regardless of instrumentation. You know, you have meter, and you have general musical tonalities. You have scales that might be somewhat similar. In circuit bending, you feel as though you've been thrust into a new way to think about music, a new way to compose music, a new way to listen to music. After all, the thing is entirely devoid of human presumption in theory, in how it actually sounds, and in how we build the instruments. Human presumption is gone from all three of those things. With experimental music or circuit bending, you might hear things a little bit differently from that point on. And, you know, it's through those tiny things that great things can happen as you follow that course. You don't have to know anything at all about electronic design to circuit bend.
It's being able to find those points. It's becoming the element, like Coltrane was, of being able to find the chaos out of the order. You know, you have the order already present, and you become the human element involved in creating the chaos. And so, in that sense, you're going beyond the third dimensional time, and you're traveling beyond into the fourth dimension. You know, and it's a method for awareness. I think that, you know, anybody who can tap into chaos has a chance of understanding it, or at least becoming aware of its presence. And in that sense, it's a chance for evolution. It's a chance for people to evolve. You know, I'm so into the old style. I'm so into like, you know, adding my artwork to it, or painting on it, doing whatever I need to do to like feel it out, you know, to feel fulfilled with it. Like, I'm not just adding some switches, because that wouldn't be so fulfilling for me. You know, it's all about the artwork for it. I like squeaky, squealy sounds, fat, floppy sounds, dig in the dirt sounds. I like things that are crunchy. I like them random. I like them, you know, squealy, like I said, you know, squealy. I like squealy things. I go in raw, straight from the start, stick to the main chips, find everything I can find on the main chips, uncover every last option, extract elements if I need to, extract a resistor, add a potentiometer, little of this, little of that, whatever. I like using capacitors a lot. It totally stabilizes things completely. So for me, it's all about capacitors. I have a capacitor setup that I go and plug in, and on sensitive circuits, it's the first thing I do. Go in straight with a capacitor and, you know, poke around, see what I find. Capacitors will sometimes taper, those really sharp things that can totally blow an instrument out, you know, like where you might find it with a capacitor, you might touch it with something else, straight lead, and you might just totally blow the thing. There's plenty of shit that I just don't understand.
My name's G. Lucas Crane. I'm from Brooklyn, and in a musical sense and in many artistic sense, I fight the non-horse, which is this, and I see it in my nightmares, and it's horribly real and sickening. It is also an imaginary creature. Circuit bending is it's perpetual breaking. It's like a machine itself. It's kind of like a principle. I mean, you can make jokes about it, but like, you know, in this day and age, a circuit bend thing is usually a toy. But the reason I think the reason it's always built off of a children's toy is that like it's Dietrich. It's all this stuff laying around. Like, these things are made commercially to entertain kids or teach kids for some reason, but they actually seem to do very little of that. Like, educationally, like, how much use do they have? Like, they're used for like 1 year in a child's life or something. So they're just, you know, hundreds of thousands of millions of these laying around, and a circuit bender uses his curiosity, innate creativity, and a lot of luck to poke around on the inside and break it, but find a way to keep it breaking, and then to harness that. It's an unusual mix of chaos, ambiguity, and like instantaneously harnessed awesomeness. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's funny. Like, you run into these phrases. Like, what else can you say? Like these phrases exist because they describe things that there are X factors. So when someone's poking around inside a toy and finds a sound and then wires it up to a switch, and then that switch does it all the time, it's like and then you put that in performance. It's like so many different types of creativity coming together. It's like a lucky break. It's all of the things that came together, all the situations that came together at that moment of the bend, and then the chaotic, inspirational territory of a performance where you then find, like, then the machine, which is hard to control as a rule. Circuit bend toys are very hard to control. Then you get, it's like this melding of opportunity and like on your toes, like on your feet, creativity and improvisation. So, like, no matter how much control you think you can have over this, it'll always surprise you. I want a T-shirt that says "I tweak knobs." Like, more and more that you press these things, I think you fetish anything that you touch every freaking day. And so I think it's perfectly acceptable, and it should be, and it's barely, yes, I love them.
Do you seek out any particular ones over others?
I think that, big fat ones, huge ones that wrap your whole hand around, rocker switches, these ones that have a setting that can be like temporary on and then always on are really nice. Pink ones. Cute ones. There's little ducks on them. I like little animal stickers, and I try to put them on many dials and switches, and I like momentary. I like those momentary switches. I'd like to think that these are the only instruments I want to play that I'm interested in, because I think that there are so, how many guitarists are there out there? How many people who want to get into music and go for I just think it's the simplest route, like pick up a bottle, smash it against the wall. There's a level of analysis out there that makes anything an instrument, and I think that it'll become more and more traditional to have noise and a noise component of bands. And I think that's what the future's going to look like. I think it's going to be all the things that you know about music with an X factor, with something that no matter what band you're coming into, it'll be like the person whose job it is to control the uncontrollable, or to attempt that and fail, but it's still something. So I think that's what the future needs. That's like a really important aspect of bands to come.
Thank you very much for that pot of work. Such a crowd in here. The pot works. I have a pretty hard and fast thought about circuit bending. I mean, I'm creating a circuit bend instrument, but it then adheres to the way I build that instrument. You can say it's circuit bent because it follows my initial discovery process. But circuit bending is an act of discovery. It goes back to how the whole thing started. Accidental short-circuiting. This is not accidental. It's the act. It's what's in your mind. It's the act of this searching something that you're not familiar with that is at the heart of bending. And like with my Vox Insectas and my human voice synthesizers, those are theory true until they're finished, and then I bend them, blindly as though I'd never seen them before, by arbitrarily shorting everything I possibly can. And if I burn something out, that doesn't bother me because I've designed it and I know exactly, how it works, and I can replace everything that I put in. If you fry, a deep, chip on someone else's deal, sometimes you're out of luck because you can't find that chip to replace it. So, I'm confident to circuit bend something that I've already designed, more so than something I haven't. But again, it's a chance process. The big difference between prototyping a circuit bend instrument and a theory true instrument is chance. As soon as you begin to water down the chance element, you're watering down the idea of the creative process behind circuit bending, because it all comes from chance. It's a chance art.
That's terrific.
What's that?
Very nice.
And what was the original?
Don't drop it.
It was a little kid's toy it was just a ball that you had to roll to get it started. So I figured since you have to shake it to get it started, you might as well just add a mercury switch to shake it even further on stage and make more weird noises with it. This thing is pre-glitched.
Hit reset.
Erase your memory.
Yeah.
Pre-glitched Furby here. Furby apocalypse.
Lobotomy. No, I was so bitter.
The pre-glitched Furby's already glitching.
Yeah.
He's looping, eh?
My closet is full of toys that are either broken or need to be opened up. Just went to thrift stores and bought everything I could, and I figured, well, since I'm going to do it all by trial and error, might as well get used to breaking stuff. And I broke so many that I really wanted to work, and I spent so much time on it, I got frustrated and just kept taking breaks and going back to it and trying to pick up stuff from other circuit benders and going to workshops.
Razor, mosquito, tourist, cheese, business, country.
When it really gets glitching, you just kind of have to keep pushing buttons and shit, and eventually.
Fuck that.
To me, circuit bending is unleashing the little goodies that are hiding inside of every toy or any set form of electronics, to just start poking around and unleash some things that are hidden in there that need to come out. It always sounds to me like they need to come out. So every time I find a bend and something really weird happens, I get excited because it feels like you released a prisoner, sort of, you know, you've done something good. No, it may not sound that great to other people. To me, I can actually put something on glitch, and if it'll continue to glitch all night, I can sleep to it. And I have done that, and I ruined a toy doing that. And fell asleep, and I woke up. Well, I was on the floor, but
What kind of toy?
it was a touch and tell.
Oh.
It sounded really cool. So I fell asleep on the floor, on a hardwood floor. Woke up and, oh, my touch and tell. Turned off the amplifier and tried to get it to work through its internal speaker, and then plugged it back into the amplifier, and it was dead. Tried new batteries, everything. I was frantic. No good. But yeah, I love it. It's soothing to me. And doing it and circuit bending itself, to me, is just, it's like, I don't know, it's relaxing, frustrating at the same time, I guess. Like I need to do it. It's for as reclusive of an art as it seems, you know, we hold up in a little room and solder fumes going, and I don't have any other music except for what's going on with the toy. I don't want anybody talking to me. I don't want the phone ringing at all. But when you come out to an event like this, or where other people are circuit bending, you know, you sort of approach with, I did anyway, approach with caution. I was nervous. I was excited. I didn't know what everybody was going to be like, and sure enough, it's the greatest. You know, this is home to me. This is great. A lot of times people say, well, hey, would you work on something for me? Would you bend a toy for me? Blah, blah, blah. And so my response now is, yeah, go pick out a toy and give it to me, and I'll just charge you for parts, you know? And I know they'll never go to the store and buy a toy, so I sound like, you know, a nice guy, and I have to do the work.
Have you ever had any negative reactions?
Just from my wife, yeah. You know, when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm not on the computer playing Day of Defeat or something, or I'm just circuit bending, making tons of noise. She'll say, you know, not everybody wants to hear that. That's noisy. She's heard Old MacDonald like 50,000 times. Mary Had a Little Lamb. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. She's sick of them. Stuff that had broken, I guess. It's just crushed me. I thought I would never get over it. You know, because you spend so much time with it, and then it's fried, and there's no way it's coming back. Seriously, I have to have a moment of silence, and then, you know, go through the rage process, and I want to break something, and then ultimately I'm just really depressed for a while. You never broke anything?
I break shit all the time. I'm so used to it, it doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever, I just fucking throw it across the room and forget about it, you know?
I'll get over it one day.
Oh, another broken toy.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Maybe I'll try and fix it later. Probably not.
I like anything like art that makes you look twice. In the case of music, you have to listen twice, 3 times. Circuit bending is getting out of the box. The parameters at which we are see life through: social input, philosophical, spiritual input, our learning. In other words, we build up these frameworks, the box. And the idea is to look out of the box. Circuit bending was basically looking outside of the box, taking the blinders off.
And why do you like circuit bending?
Just the king hell sound that it puts out. Back in the late 60s, not to say I didn't invent circuit bending, I didn't even imagine the implications until Reed actually did something with the instruments. But it was the transistor radio, the first square little transistor radio. And for a kid back then, that was high tech. I remember my first transistor radio. Well, being inclined electromechanic, I couldn't help but to take the back off. Of course, as soon as you start touching the back of the circuit board, you get touch contact, which is circuit bending. So that happened in the late 60s. That was the first experience, but I didn't think of it as circuit bending. It wasn't until Reed actually started the speak and spell phase of it. He went through the Odorbox phase, speak and spells, that I decided to try to bend my own instrument. And that was 94, 95. And this has been, I think, my one and only primary instrument. I've bent a few others. Our playing was living room jams. So, like, we were in a band together. I mean, I think the saddest part is losing a circuit. It's like losing a loved one, and they have a life expectancy of their own, and eventually the instruments die. And that's part of it.
When Mike Rosenthal got in touch with me, what he was doing was he was putting together essentially a week of bands and workshops and stuff. Since I no longer play out, I used to play out, and in some of the craziest places you would not believe, it's the awe and the joy on these children's faces that really threads the entire circuit bending movement. It reminds me of how I felt as a young teenager discovering this new sound system. Young minds are great minds. Because, they have not been told that this kind of music is unacceptable or is too divergent or one thing or another. Schools are taking notice, and that they're seeing the value in this because, experimental art, it escapes the medium. It makes you think about experimentalism and about breaking rules in all these other fields that you then touch upon. And this is how we evolve. This is how we expand our thoughts and appreciations as a society. And why not in these young, great minds? I'm 100% with you. In 1992, I wrote the first EMI article, and in that article, I coined the term circuit bending. Words are very powerful. Words are very powerful. If you are working with something and there is no term for what you've discovered, coin a term, okay? Because that makes people think and talk, and all of a sudden you can discuss these things. Whereas if I made something that makes a weird sound, okay, fine. That's what I said for all those previous years. But once I labeled it circuit bending, that was a touchstone. That kind of shoots things forward. Pick up an abandoned circuit and circuit bend that. These abandoned circuits are like the coconuts. In fact, these abandoned circuits maybe are the coconuts of our island. And for us to view them in the same way, this module that if you approach it with a musician's mind and make a few little alterations on it, all of a sudden it has a voice. It's no longer just bobbing in the surf, waiting to become landfill and waiting to become smoke in an incinerator or something like that. This is a great thing, to grab this up and musicalize it. So, I see it as something that needed to happen, that was going to happen. If I hadn't done it, somebody else would do it. If this were a workshop, you guys wouldn't be listening to me at all. You wouldn't want to. You'd have your circuits open and you'd be thinking, oh, shut up, man. I just want to circuit bend this thing. I'll ask you a question if I get to that point. And that's how it should be. That series in EMI starting in 1992 did create, I kicked over a tiny pebble then. And the avalanche had nothing to do with me, probably. I kicked over that tiny pebble and it knocked all these larger stones, and now we do have a landslide happening all around the planet. We have to ask, what is damage? What is damage? What if the circuit doesn't come back around the way it's supposed to, but it still makes a really cool sound, or a bunch of really cool sounds? Is it damaged?
No.
Or is it transformed?
It's transformed.
It's like us and our minds, We can think different things, but we can also think the way we used to. Are new thoughts damaging? I mean, have we changed in some way? What if you learn a new language? That's something that I find as a parallel here, because the instruments now speak in a new language. Sometimes it's a musical language, sometimes it's just chains of phonemes, and it just sounds like speech or something. But I look at these instruments as though they have gone through a process of exposure, and now they can respond in ways that they weren't able to before. If we do that, we're considered educated, right? We've learned something that we didn't know before. And that's what I feel about these instruments. If it's expendable and sitting there, circuit bend it. That'll bring it back to life and make it exciting again. Hackers usually know something about electronics, and probably should for what they're into.
Correct.
Circuit benders don't need to know anything about theory or electronics, and it's not goal oriented. If you're hacking something, you might want a cleaner output. You might want to replace the preamps to get cleaner sound. You might want more inputs and more outputs. That's goal oriented. Circuit bending is not goal oriented. It's chance oriented. And we accept chance in visual art left and right, whether it's the American Expressionists or whether you go back into Japan and look at their Suminagashi work.
Right.
We embrace wholeheartedly chance in visual art. But for some reason, and I'd like your opinion on this, talk to each other. Why is it? I was asking Shalom, the great sculptor who did this work here, why is it that chance in music or abstraction in music is much more difficult for us, probably not for us in this audience, but generally for us, than abstraction or chance in visual art? I don't know. It feels like digging in a gold mine. And if you have been experienced with the traditional means of sound synthesis, and I love all that, I love a good music lab, you will find that there is an immediacy to circuit bending. This thing is, you're no longer dealing with non-normalized or even a normalized synthesizer's controls. You're dealing with a circuit. The actual guts of what makes this sound is right there at your fingertips, producing often absolutely incredible output. And I just, if anyone here would like to try it but is reluctant, don't be. It's simple. Anyone can do it. You're not going to get electrocuted. Nothing bad is going to happen. The worst case scenario is you might burn the instrument out. But again, I say, buy these things secondhand. At least where I come from in the Midwest, an SK1 can be bought for 60 cents. I kid you not. I know that people are accustomed to seeing these things on eBay for big money. But I pay between 60 cents and $3. Those are the prices of the thrift stores where I live. For SK1s, Speak and Spells, SK5s, all these things that sold for so much more and contain all of this great accessible circuitry. Bart Hopkin wrote the book that came in this package, Gravichords, Whirlies, and Pyrophones. And this turned a lot, this package, book CD package, turned a heck of a lot of people onto not only circuit bending, but a lot of great acoustic experimental instruments. And circuit bending is even a busker's art now. Our friendly videographer here, Derek, is the guy over there with the red fez on. Derek, you're playing an instrument built by Ben, is that right?
Oh, it's built by me.
Oh, it's built by you, wonderful. I'd like you to tell us who these three people are. I know it's you on the right there.
It's Jeff Landis on the left, Andy Ben in the center, and me on the right.
And I understand you actually had a permit.
We went out and we got street performers permits. And we're hoping to make our money back this year.
More power to you.
$37 for a year. We were performing the Golden Girls theme. Repeatedly, 5 times.
Some people have said circuit bending is emotionless music. They haven't seen this. I really like the way industry used to make electronic parts. They'd use milk glass and brass and engraving and just all kinds of great stuff that just does not get made anymore. A lot of these knobs, that's a knob collection, are made of Bakelite and old protoplastic. And I don't usually go out. I'm really a reclusive person. I'm very private. All my friends know that. But I'm really glad that I came. It's been a super blast for me. And again, I have to point out Mike here because, exposing emerging arts is just ultra important, and it doesn't happen all the time. So people like Mike are just really near and dear to me in that this is what they want to do. Should also mention that, if I understand this correctly, the tank and the whole block is coming down, eminent domain or something like that. So this place, that you're in right now, its days are limited. We need to support Mike and these kind of rooms wherever we go because they are great exposure mediums. All kinds of stuff gets launched from places like this.
Originally it was called the Little Smart Driver. It was basically a VTech toy, a driving simulator for learning how to recognize letters, alphabet, numbers. I originally took the name, covered up the letters, and got Le Art River. And to me, it was just totally mad Art River. To me, it was a flowing succession of chaos and madness. M-A-R, and modified by myself in '95. Concept was definitely Reed Gonzalez circuit bending. Basically, found a point on the phonetic chip. Anyway, it being a simulated car, you have your sound of a car starting, and you have your
1, 2, 3, 4.
letters. You have
Please press the number 4.
Instructionals. And then we have
J.
letters. Okay. So what I did
Press the letter Q.
is I put a momentary contact switch, which would short circuit point A to point B.
W.
And
O.
keep hitting it. It's never done that before.
Chance.
are the instruments I developed using basically AM/FM radio circuits, because they produce the best tones for the kind of work that I do, which is basically very extreme, very loud, very aleatoric tones.
Transparency of being able to see people taking apart things and sort of giving everyday objects sort of new use.
The act that results in this type of clutter and sort of essentially the wasteland that circuit bending seems to obviously leave behind. And well, I know that, you know, the end result, the goal is to put back a machine together in working order. I like the experimentation that's led to these piles of gutted toys.
Yeah, we like mess a lot, actually.
Yeah, clutter.
Yeah.
Pretty good stuff. Cool. Toys R Us one.
Nice. Alright, we're back.
Are you back?
Yeah.
Alright. Good to go.
About a year ago or a year and a half ago, I had met some friends who did a lot of circuit bending and it got me kind of excited about it. So I took apart some little keyboards, but I actually sort of got carried away with making tunes out of something I had barely circuit bent at all, and so I didn't really actually get too into the electronics of it. And then I guess about 6 months ago, when we first started talking about having a festival, we went out and bought a bunch of stuff and spent a couple nights on the floor just kind of trying to circuit bend ourselves, but I'd never done any others.
Yeah, nothing per se. I've certainly destroyed tons of toys in my life, but
never really put them back together again. No, we just want to, you know, we do a lot of shows upstairs that are very laptop based, or people doing a lot of things with electronics, and it's just a lot of times it's a bit inaccessible, and so we've just been trying, you know, I do some teaching, and so we're just trying to think of ways to sort of get people excited and getting them into electronic music, and this seemed like a pretty good way to do it. So we're definitely more enthusiasts than anything else. And the festival's been awesome. I mean, you know, the whole idea was just to get a bunch of people around who, you know, I signed on to the circuit bending mailing list, you know, the news groups and this sort of thing about 4 months ago, because I didn't know too much about the community, and I wanted to sort of get a feel of what these sorts of people were like and what they talk about and what they think about. And it just became apparent that it was very much a sort of electronic community. Everybody was sort of engaging with each other over email and on news groups, but that nobody was really coming together. And maybe there'd be little pockets of scenes happening where somebody would want to tour and they'd play little coffee houses or whatever, but that there wasn't sort of some space that people could come together and sort of all see each other at once and really sort of geek out together. And so we thought it would be nice to have a spot where everybody could come together and just sort of do their thing. And it's been awesome. There's been a lot of weird people around, and like it's definitely shown itself to be that like the general public dig it as well. So it's a nice thing when you can keep it real, you know, keep all the geeks happy, keep everybody who actually does the work happy, and have them do their thing, but expose it to a whole new audience as well, and have those people get excited about it too. And for us, that's definitely a lot of the reason why we're here, I think.
And like the festival sort of format for it is it kind of works for like just for this the one-off concerts are great that we do, and we enjoy that a lot. But having everybody sort of living or circulating around this space and having always having vendors around that people can talk to in a very casual, informal basis is phenomenal. It's really it makes for a little world that's great for us to like jump into.
We thought, this is something that you can give people more than just a concert. You can get people engaged in it, and it's totally worked out. We've had workshops, we've had some presentations, and just getting people to know that they don't have to sit over here and watch somebody over there do it, but they can just roll up their sleeves and come down to the gallery and just pick up a toy and start just touching wires to knobs and finding different things that happen. And it's been remarkably successful. As soon as somebody gets one little thing happening, even if it's the thing that the toy did in the first place, if they can get it to happen again while they're looking at the circuit board, it completely empowers them and sort of gets them excited about it again. Showing people that like all these toys that they've been growing up with their whole lives are, suddenly there's a whole other side of them that they've never thought to deal with before. It's pretty exciting because everybody's got loads of junk at home. All these old toys are just sitting there going to waste, and if you can show people that they can sort of take them apart and do new stuff with them, that's pretty exciting for them as well. This is the tank, and we got the space about a year ago. It was sitting empty for about 6 months, and they're going to tear down the whole block in about 2 years maybe, so they offered us the space for incredibly reduced rent in exchange for the fact that they can sort of kick us out at will. And so we've just been running it. We do 5 nights a week programming. We're non-profit. We're all completely volunteer-based. Yeah, there's about 8 people that run it collectively and curate in different events, different types of events, and we've just been doing it.
We do theater, we do film, we do comedy, we do music, and Mike and I sort of are the ones who work more on the experimental, multimedia type of events, but we have lots of different other programming, and that's kind of what's exciting about that. Is it brings in a lot of different, people who come to see comedy shows and aren't really into multimedia or aren't into this type of stuff. Stop by anyway, and because the gallery's open, they can come down and check it out. A lot of them are really far more excited than they might have thought they would be, and that's that sort of cross audience, pollination it's been really exciting. Cool.
We're really into pollination.
We dance. We do little bee dances
But that's got to be it, right? We clearly have nothing else to say.
John Cage is a name that even if you've never heard anything by him, you may have heard the name, like Jack the Ripper. It's just one of those names. And John Cage, of course, did turn music upside down. And among other things, Cage promoted very early use of electronics in live performance. Cage worked closely with a virtuoso pianist of the time, the great pianist for avant-garde music of the day, named David Tudor, which is a name that fewer people know. Tudor died in the 90s, as did Cage. Their era is past, but their legacy lives on in various strange ways. And Tudor learned early circuitry work in the days of tubes, believe it or not, primarily from another wonderful mythic figure of the avant-garde named Gordon Mumma. And throughout from the late 50s on, and primarily the 60s and 70s, Tudor sort of pioneered a live electronic performance form that was based on distributed, what we might call massively parallel analog. Yeah? He worked with lots of small circuits interconnected in all kinds of matrices. So that the point was not an individual box and how beautiful it sounded, but what happened when you fed boxes into each other. Most of his circuits had an input and an output, not just an output. Yeah? And he created massive feedback networks. And it was a very odd thing. There were circuits that he would have made from scratch, some of which were relatively comprehensible to an engineer, some of which were anarchic engineering, because he was never trained as an engineer. And then he used a lot of found material. He used a lot of toys. He used a lot of cheap rock boxes, fuzz tones, flangers, auto filters. Some he'd use stock, some he'd tweak, some broke, and he liked the way they sounded when they were broke. In the early 70s, he started an ensemble called Composers Inside Electronics, where he tried to get younger composers coming into the goofy music field to really get involved in the electronics, not just say, I want that sound and that sound and that sound, but to sort of look inside circuitry and figure out what kind of music did the circuit want to make. I mean, let's face it, this comes hard on the heels of the Summer of Love, right? This is a kind of a pot smoker's approach to electronic music. So, Tudor was very influential in a certain scene. And the music of the 1970s, a lot of the American music in the 1970s was very much colored by this sort of homemade electronics style. Yeah? And there's a couple dozen composers who came out of that cauldron, people who are now basically in their 40s and 50s, who were sort of seat-of-the-pants engineers. Some were terrible engineers, some were great engineers, but they all made wonderful, weird circuitry that did great things. Now, I know, I hear, because I don't do groups, news groups and things like that, but there are these like philosophical distinctions creeping up about circuit bending. Someone just told me, is it bending or is it modifying what you were doing? You know, and I'm thinking, you know, who has the patience? What I'm doing is I'm trying to get from, you know, the beginning point of a musical work to the end point of a musical work by the most efficient means possible. One day that might involve a cello. You know, one day it might involve a radio, one day it might involve a toy, one day it might involve a circuit I built from scratch, one day it might involve a computer. Personally, I don't care. I ended up offering a course in what I called hardware hacking, which is like, it's like non-doctrinaire circuit bending. It's like the Unitarian version of circuit bending, okay? And, you know, I kind of walk these people through electronic processes, starting with the sort of classic bending thing of opening up a piece of found technology and figuring out what you can do to it to change it. Yeah? But I also do a lot of what we might call instruments for listening with. That is, making contact mics and coils and things that you can use to just hear the world in different ways. Yeah? Sound collectors. And I also make circuits with them. I have them make circuits from scratch. But this is where I become even more culty than the average bender, which is that I have very sort of strict rules about how to do circuits so that you don't need any test instruments to do them with. You need an absolute minimum of components. Everything has to be able to run off a battery. I never let my students plug anything into the wall, since I'm the guy that's going to get the big lawsuit if they get killed. And there are a number of other sort of silly prohibitions, and so I've built up kind of a Lego-style system of doing extremely funky analog electronics that is just a little step to the side of what anybody can do from just opening up a toy and going like this on the circuit. I always tell my students, ignorance is bliss, so enjoy it. You know, don't worry about being stupid. And two wrongs do make a right. You know, if you can't figure it out, ask someone else who hasn't figured it out either, and you'll probably figure it out together. I think there's a lot of nervousness involved in dealing with new media. I love that quote of Todd Mackover's in the paper this week about the bending thing. He's like, oh yes, this is very interesting, but I can't help but thinking there are easier ways to make interesting sounds with modern software. Well, maybe if you have a programmer working for you, yes. But is there anything easier than this? I kind of doubt it. There may be more powerful means of making another sound, but this is one of the easiest in the world, for God's sake. But then Todd does have a lot of grad students and probably no sense of reality. So for me, this is just, you know, hearing all that other stuff that's in a circuit besides what the circuit was meant to do. And that's, again, like a kind of a very old Tudor idea. Sort of late 60s, 70s thing of there's all this sound inside electronics that we're not, you know, we're either not allowed to hear or just nobody's bothered to show it to. So when I do the hacking class that I do, you know, the first thing that we do is I ask everybody to take a transistor radio, to buy a transistor radio, and make sure it works, and then unscrew it, open it up, tune it to a dead spot on the station, lick their hand, and put it on the back of the circuit board. And within anything from 2 seconds to an hour, it'll start to oscillate. Why? Because, as you know, your flesh enters into the circuit. And new feedback paths are created through your skin, which is a resistor, right? And a very, very touch responsive resistor. So that once you find this kind of what my students irreverently call the G spot on the radio, it's incredibly sensitive in terms of, you know, being able to play it like a theremin or like a violin. It's very, very touch sensitive. And I do this as a kind of like a shock therapy to these guys who have been programming their hearts out for the last 3 years, because it's tactile, it's direct, it's immediate. And it's one of the things that I'm very interested in when I work with circuitry is performability. I don't record. I don't do studio music. Yeah? Like every 8 years I put out a record of performance pieces that I've somehow laboriously crunched onto a tape. But what I'm interested in is live performance. And one of the great things about this type of technology that all you guys are working with is live performance. The fact that it's tactile. Yeah? It's about touch. And I continue to emphasize that as we go along and we start to do other kinds of hacks where, let's say, you find the spot on the circuit with your finger, but then you put in a pot to change the speed of the clock so you can slow down your speaker and slow. I say that's great, that's wonderful, but never forget that the pot is like this gesture. You know, it's a linear change and it always has the same kind of shape curve to it. But when you use your fingers, you get these beautiful disjunctions and these breaks, and you can kind of slip and play it. I said the finger's the instrument. So we work on a lot of like very simple little interface things, like always making sure that when you have the pot, you have 2 wires sticking up where you wire the pot in, so that as you turn the pot, you can still short your fingers across the contacts to make it jitter. No brainer. Dimes. I tell them solder dimes to the ends of wires and bring them up to the top of the circuit board, so you always can touch the board even if it's housed. It's especially nice when I go into like a very computer-oriented music program, and I have everybody licking circuit boards. There's a certain horrible satisfaction that I
Whereas these instruments have no preconceptions, and so people are forced to deal with just the information that they're getting through their ears. And that seems to be much more of a direct communication and less influenced by prejudices and preconceptions and all the things that get in the way of art.
start to think about what it means to be bent.
You know I love toys.
Good when you pet me. Good when you pet me. It goes good.
He wants to get in the mosh pit.
As a help, the beats in the first line are counted out loud. There are also 2 extra 4-beat patterns before the
And we try to really communicate to, actually, rather than it just being indulgent and just sort of subjecting people to our craziness, we want to present something that's actually, an experience of some kind that's actually enjoyable.
This is John Soriano. We are audience.
Thank you, Mark and Dan, Circuit Freaks, Punks, Brooklyn, Manhattan.
It's gonna be here.
The Landless Farm, everybody. We've got albums in the back every time we come live.
Thank you for coming. Hell yeah. I love a handful of people.
Yeah. I just love the end of the night. Let's all have a beer and drink some cigarettes.
Only circuit bending instrument that runs on batteries. I used to say 9 volts or less. This operates on 9 volts, and in a couple of the positions you can feel the current. Now that's scary to some people. This right here, I can feel the pulsing of the electricity. Again, it runs on 9 volts. I've never found that I can feel the electricity from a circuit that runs on 6 volts, so I have amended my how-tos to 6 volt at the maximum. You know, it's up to the individual what voltage they want to work with and what they feel comfortable with. Yeah, there's a lot of conjecture about what circuit bending is and what it isn't. To be totally honest with you, a lot of people try to shoehorn instruments into the circuit bending genre when they may or may not truly be circuit bent instruments. You know, I love all kinds of electronic design. I prototype, I build from kits, I speculate and dream about instruments that take me years to actually discover the correct electronic process, true theory, to approach the construction and the final design. And you know, like I say, there are Rube Goldberg devices, so to speak, just wacky electronics that have mechanics that trip this and that, and all of this is very close to my heart. And I mean, I love it all. I do all that. I've done it for decades, but I am concerned that the art can be watered down if the chance element is lost.
To me, circuit bending is when you are able to actually extract whatever it is and turn it into something completely different. And modification is where it's still what it is. It's still what it originally was, but you have the ability to do something else with it.
Our job as circuit benders is to be as brainless as we possibly can. I've always found that easy. I don't know about you guys. For me, I can do it without even thinking. The circuit bent instrument operates outside the original designer's intention. If it operated within the original designer's intention, then that person knew where it wanted to go and created something through presumption. We presume we want something to do a certain thing. How do I make that work? Oh, I'll try it this way. Wonderful, but that's not chance. It's conscious, cognizant design. And again, that's wonderful, but to keep circuit bending alive, I feel we need to respect the heart of circuit bending, which again is chance. Why is that wonderful? It's wonderful because anybody of any age, anywhere on the planet can do it. We have children circuit bending at MIT, at the Topanga schools. These kids are not electronic experts. They don't know a resistor from a capacitor, and they don't need to, and that's wonderful. The reason these children are able to circuit bend is because it is a simple chance process. With chance wiring in circuit bending, there is always the possibility, in fact, the great possibility, the strong possibility of creating an instrument that makes sounds that no one has ever heard before. That's important to composers because every sound elicits an emotion, like every color elicits an emotion. And if you are into composing and arranging, that's what we do. We emotionally respond to the things around us. They tell us what they need. We are the elements' friends. We take the elements and group them together because composers are friends of sound. We feel friendly about the sound around us, and we try to accompany those sounds with other sounds that create a piece, just like a composer would look at the sounds of an orchestra and arrange them into a piece of music. That's what we do again with the circuit bent sound. It's just that maybe it pushes us further to think, well, what do I do with this unusual sound?
see, it's a camshaft mechanical sequencer, and a variety of keyboards that are all interfacing with the sequencer. And what it does is it has a shaft with different wheels on it that turn and hit different switches. And this is obviously the sequencer, and this is just a control interface that I use to play other instruments, and it can be configured in a variety of different ways. The way that I have it set up is just to be playing melodies on these different keyboards. You can use it to turn lights on and off if you want to. You can patch audio through it and have it turn the audio on and off. I might hook it up this evening to be playing drum sounds from a little drum machine. So these will be playing melodies. You know, this will be playing the bass, this will be playing a little melody, and this will play another little melody, and then another toy will be playing a little drum beat. So you can make whole compositions with it. It's the opportunity to take something that you have an expectation of. It functions in a certain way, and you know it to function in that way, and through some simple poking and prodding, you're able to be completely dazzled and surprised, and sometimes let down or disappointed. But you've just shown something completely new that you never knew existed, and never thought would happen. An idea that if you were doing purely electronic theory, you would, everything must be controlled, and you will decide what will happen and make it happen, but you would never come up with these ideas, and it presents something to you, which, I think a lot of art forms are like that, where the art piece brings something to you and you're sort of led around by the painting you're doing or something. And, I've talked to a lot of electronic technicians, to get help for this stuff, and sometimes they can't even think in this realm, because it's all about understanding and control. So I think this is sort of a nice combination of theory and art. That wasn't a very short answer. There's always something new, and there's always a new interface and new sounds. So I think it's just endlessly exciting. That's why I like it. Yeah, everyone I've lived with has kind of turned into a circuit vendor. With a few exceptions, but and they've all been, plagued by the, we all walk around, I want to be friends with you. Oh, happy nub nub, because I play with these toys and it's the same sounds over and over and over, and it gets drilled into everyone's brain. But despite the annoying brainwashing of it, people have gotten really excited about it, and some have really taken to it, some have sort of gotten more of an interest in performing with them. But yeah, definitely, it's something you take around with you, and it just has this natural appeal. It doesn't alienate people like a lot of other art forms do, where there's something that it just kind of uses the waste from the world around you that everyone's familiar with, and it's really none of the materials you're using have any lofty assumptions. They're just children's toys. They're just devices that people remember playing with when they were younger, that they have their own connection with, and so everyone's able to be amazed by it and approach it. And so I've gotten, save one new comment, nothing but absolute wonder and amazement, which is pretty good. Well, I always kind of joke that, looking at a magazine of modular synths with all the knobs is vastly more exciting than looking at a girly mag or something. It just, the same part of you without it being sexual. It's yeah, I see all these knobs and I just start feeling. I love a beautiful interface. I can spend, a couple hours sorting through my bin of various knobs, looking for the one that looks right, you know, putting a few next to each other, and no, that's not quite right, and getting another one, replacing them later. You know, I like using knobs that sort of help indicate the function in contrast to other knobs. You know, like, so obvious things like larger knobs are for, you know, like coarse tune of pitch, smaller knob would be fine tune. But also just, you know, using that as another tool for sort of making a cohesive interface. And yeah, I mean, the switches and the knobs, the hardware in general is just like vastly important. And it's something I'm always, with every device, always thinking about. I've tried, I've suffered to make it a career. I've been, you know, immensely poor for many years, just because I don't want to get a job, because this takes so long. Sometimes it gets really, really frustrating. Just, I feel completely defeated sometimes, because no matter how much time I can commit to this, it's not enough time. You know, every device takes, you know, the sequencer took 6 months, not to build this, but of prototyping, of getting it right, of finding the right parts. If you've got a full-time job and it's just a hobby, you can't do it. And because of the way circuit bending is, where you're always making something new, I can't just pour myself into one device and be like, this is it, I'm going to patent it and sell it to whoever, you know, Yamaha or something. So I've been trying to make it a career, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to pursue it. And there is the interest, there's the clients. It's just that it takes so much time to build everything. And I won't rant too much about it, but one of the really frustrating things is that you know, the art price frame and the musical instrument price frame are so different, but I'm subject to the musical instrument price frame more, and that's made it a little hard. I mean, if I was able to get art prices for this stuff, I think I could definitely. I lived in New York for 8 months and paid my bills circuit bending, so that was like $900 a month. But you know, I was sort of just starting, and I was still like, I wasn't beaten down.
Oh no.
A lot of people are saying you don't need to know anything, just jump in and do it. But I think that you're going to hit a wall pretty fast. The speaking spell, of course, was something that I was the first device I ever spent. I bought 3 of them on eBay and just spent a year and a half just on the speaking spell. I didn't touch anything else. That was all I ever did. And it was a great time, but I was not experiencing, you know, this vast world of other devices. You know, I certainly haven't found, you know, every glitch you can do to it, but I spent enough time with this, so I decided that maybe there was something else out there that I could play with. And what I discovered was that basically anything that makes electronic sound, there's a real good chance that you can do something kind of crazy with it. The best thing to do if you really want to be doing this for a while is just get as many things as you possibly can. They're cheap. If you break them, it doesn't really matter. And you'll start to notice similarities between different circuits. And that's what's been the most informative for me. I spent a year and a half in the speaking spell. I learned a lot about the speaking spell, but I didn't learn a ton about other stuff. I mean, I did learn about techniques of soldering, you know, the techniques of mounting hardware. There's a lot of stuff you can't learn until you're a year down the road and you realize that all of your switches have fallen off and all of your wire connections are broken.
The first thing we're going to look for is body contact. A body contact is an area on the circuit that when you touch it, it changes the sound of the circuit. Once you get your toys open, what we want to do is get the toy to make a noise, because you have to do the tests on the circuit while the circuit is making a sound. This is the first circuit from 1967 or 68, 66 to 68 that's shorted out in my drawer. It's a body contact instrument, and the first thing we're going to be looking for is body contact. My volunteer is going to show how we demonstrate what a body contact is. was on the 1960s, but we'd get a whole chain of people. People would kiss, they'd hug each other, etc. The whole time, this would be plugged into an amplifier at, you know, making a sonic piece of whatever misbehavior was going on. Can you hear how the voice is being vibratoed or modulated as I touch this? I'll start it. Okay, when I touch this sphere here, this little brass ball, what's going on? Well, there's a wire attached to this, and the wire simply goes to a spot on the circuit. Now, how you find that is very simple. I hate to take this down because this is so important. But everybody understands chance at this point, right? Chance is the heart of what we're going after here. As you begin to work with circuit bending, it will sort of teach you electronics. I've never been formally trained in electronics. I've never taken a class. But, you know, it begins to, circuit bending will teach you what circuits do. The circuits will sort of tell you where they want to go. Well, in 1997, when I launched
No way. That's crazy. Wow.
Hey, Barry!
Yeah, let me, I think I can actually plug two things into this PA thing. I'm gonna put it on play so nobody can mess with it. I like this.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the last night of the Circuit Bending Festival. I believe this is the first one in New York City, right? My name is Mark. Well, my history with circuit bending goes back with knowing Reed starting in '72. We were playing music back together, rock, bass, and drums. My first real interest in circuit bending happened in '94, '95, and I have the last surviving instrument from that beginning era. Now, it was like last minute, Michael really, amidst the intense program, let me sit in, you know, at the last minute. And I realized that I didn't have any more instruments except a little smart driver, which I covered up the letters. And you got Le Aprila, right? And to me it was totally mad, so it's Mad Art River. So I went through my files and I found mostly sounds of circuits that have passed on. So I thought, in light of the holidays going on, we have Passover and we have Easter, I thought I would reach into the entrails of the lamb, smear some of that around a bit, and sort of do a resurrection type of idea. So this is more of a eulogy, a wake, a memoriam for our dear, loved, deceased circuits who have recently and in past have bitten the dust, performing their outrageous sounds, and most of them at that last moment let out their death screams. Hark the bells, angels sing, glory, the new profane, the new confane, throat, con, eye of glass, and life cycle, God, dog, hog, sinner's chicken style, join the club, wonder why. Hit the circuit, recorded before it dies. With the soldering gun, cops refrain. You have to know, bitch, where chances remain. Hark, hark. Where does that word come from? The circuit angels sing. Glory to the movie, the newborn voices. Deceased, April 1st, 2002. Brought back, April 3rd, 2004. Lowry, Teeny Genie, January 2004. 555, March 14th, 2004. Alien Vocoder, March 17th, 2004. The Ducati Solid State 100, December 1999. And with the Red Scheme, Missing in Action, 2002. If anyone sees this toy, please call. Sunny, the Club Radio, March 27th, 2004. The Link Voucher, December 2003. The Spacecraft 606, resurrected 2 times. Died 2001. Little Squeaky Baby, we miss you, babe. B-Tech Video Painter, Orange 12, 2004.
My name's Derek. This is Dave over here, and the other part of the group is on the road right now. His name's Eric, and they all made this happen. I'm showing a video and doing some music. It's 17 minutes, so bear with it. And thank you, Virgin Mega Whore. Go ahead and hit play.
I start, I just want to give a shout out to Mike and Daniel for throwing the probably the best thing I've ever done in my life here. This festival kicks ass. Well, thank you for letting me play one more time. I also want to give a shout out to Poppycock, Hogwash, Gobbledygook, Doorcore 2004, and more. So let's get to it.
Hello, let's play.
Body contact instrument. It's a pure body contact instrument. It's got no switches. All you do is connect things on a circuit board to alter or completely mess up the sound. Germany, soft bending is not really a widespread term or widespread known. So this thing is starting at the moment, and I'm going to write an article about it in the German Keyboards magazine. And I think that will start some people to look on their shelf and maybe find their own SK1 or whatever and open it and try around a little bit.
Sometimes the simplest things are the best, and that's something that I learned from my friends that do circuit bending, because I'm always trying to overthink, over-engineer, do it in this complicated way. Now, I don't know if it was here last Friday night, some friends of mine from Boston played here, Travis Fuller and Josh Heidman.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, pretty rocking. So one time I was playing with Josh, we were playing at my house, and I was playing this modular, playing that patch actually that I just had. And he was playing this white keyboard, this piece of trash he found on the street, you know, that I don't even know if he bent it. I think he just, you know, lifts his fingers and touches it. And he was getting the exact same sound that I got. And I thought, geez, I spent 4 years and, you know, $1,000 or whatever. Why? I don't even know why I wasted my time. It's just a different thing.
lot more circuit creation than circuit bending.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how much chance is involved?
There's a lot of chance. Different manifestations of chance.
Mysteries of nature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like there's totally monks walking under these waterfalls a few feet over from us right now, you know? Like in the fourth dimension. You know what I mean? I think not knowing ends at the interior of the skin, and then knowing begins on the exterior of your skin. Why is it the reverse? I don't know.
He was trying to do a piece by simulation, and then his computer crashed.
The Max MSP and stuff. Can everyone just really come closer because I have something small that I want to show you? These worms are dead. Look at that. We've had them. Oh my god, I can't believe this. We bought these back in Pittsburgh, and they played in Toronto, and Buffalo, and New London, and New Haven, and Boston, and Providence. And now, I think it's your air pollution. You guys are totally screwed up my worms.
This is my show. Woo. Welcome to it. I first found out about it from this compilation CD, Graphic Chords, Rolls, and Barcodes, which I'm sure you've heard of before. I would imagine that a lot of more normal people would see this as something really alien and maybe kind of scary too. People don't really like unconventional things for the most part. You know, I'm in it for fun. I don't expect to make money off of it, and I don't make money off of it. It actually costs me a lot more money than I ever make from it.
Where's the circuit bending?
We built this.
Festival's over, folks. That's it. We're done. We're not going anywhere per se, but we might have a beer.
Beer, son.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, everybody. Please join the mailing list. Please have a beer at the bar. Please feel free to hang out. It's been awesome having everybody all week long.
It's good stuff, man. Everything that's happening with this whole thing is good. Yeah. Being here is beautiful. You know, meeting all these vendors. I mean, and all these people that I've emailed with. That, you know, it's cool to put the face with the name and know who I'm actually talking to.
Yeah, it's been really positive too.
Yeah, it's been super positive.